Good morning, and welcome to this online service of Neshoba Unitarian Universalist Church. I am the Reverend Beth Lefever, pleased and privileged to be the minister of this congregation, and I'm so very glad that you have joined with us this morning. My opening words this morning are by William Wordsworth. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean and the living air, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. In this spirit, let us be together in worship. And now Cynthia Murray will light our chalice and recite the words of our covenant.
As we light the chalice today, let's reflect on these words. We come together to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, to reclaim the vision of an earth more fair, with all her people one. Anonymous. Now, if you would please repeat with me our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Good morning. The story for all ages today is Life Doesn't Frighten Me, poem by Maya Angelou, images by Jean-Michel Basquiat. Shadows on the wall, noises down the hall. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Big dogs barking loud. Big ghosts in a cloud. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Mean old mother goose, lions on the loose. They don't frighten me at all. Dragons breathing flame on my counterpane. That doesn't frighten me at all. I go boot, make them shoot. I make fun, way they run. I won't cry, so they fly. I just smile, they go wild. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Tough guys fight, all alone at night. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Panthers in the park, strangers in the dark. No, they don't frighten me at all. That new classroom where boys all pull my hair, kissy little girls with their hair in curls. They don't frighten me at all. Don't show me frogs and snakes and listen for my scream. If I'm afraid at all, it's only in my dreams. I've got a magic charm that I keep up my sleeve. I can walk the ocean floor and never have to breathe. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Not at all. Not at all. Life doesn't frighten me at all.
May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Please give as you are able to support our church and our mission. Ways to give are listed on the graphic. We are grateful. My reading this morning is from a reflection entitled Going Back to Kent by a Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Barbara Child. May 4th will be the 50th anniversary of the sunny Monday at Kent State University when the Ohio National Guard fired their weapons toward a parking lot where some students were attempting to protest escalation of the American war in Vietnam, and others were simply making their way to class. The Guard wounded 9, including one who was paralyzed for life. They killed 4, including one who was on her way to class. I have been a Unitarian Universalist minister for over 2 decades, but I was then a professor in the Kent State University English department. I was on the Kent Commons that terrible day, and I believe I am a minister today because I was there that day. Reverend Child graciously granted me permission to use her reflection, for which I am indebted, and I will be interspersing portions of it throughout today's sermon. Those of you of about retirement age and beyond likely remember Kent State clearly. Others of you may have read about it, and still others may know little or nothing about the shootings that occurred there 50 years ago. I remember the shootings. It was a tumultuous time, and I was a very different person than I am now. Reverend Child continues. In the early ensuing years, the university tried to convey that the killings were a tragic accident, nothing the university was responsible for, nothing anyone should fear ever happening again. It took a long time to get any physical memorial on the campus. First, the KSU Hillel and faculty erected a small stone near where the dead fell. Eventually, the university erected a memorial in the form of several unremarkable slabs of stone. Not until 2007, after unremitting pressure from a few who would not let up, did the Ohio Historical Society erect a marker near the site. There is a proper memorial sculpture, but it is not at Kent State. The sculptor, George Segal, having been commissioned by the university, produced a contemporary representation of Abraham and Isaac. Isaac, the son, in cut-off jeans with his wrists bound, is on his knees, looking up at his father in supplication. Abraham stands over his son, undeterred, preparing to wield a knife. Kent State officials rejected the sculpture as too violent. It is permanently installed at Princeton University, where Segal taught, and where the families of Kent's dead went to make a proper ceremony at its installation. I was just out of high school, working at the local newspaper and beginning to rub elbows with the liberal reporters there, but I was still my parents' child. My parents were politically conservative, and though I was confused by the tumult of the day, I tended toward their view that the guardsmen were very young and faced with a frightening situation. They should not have fired into the crowd, but perhaps the crowd should not have been there. Reverend Child. To its credit, Kent State has carried out a commemoration every year. A candlelight march begins at 11 p.m. on May 3rd. The procession winds its way through the campus and ends in the parking lot where a rabbi says the Kaddish, and in recent years a Christian minister has said a prayer as well. Quite coincidentally, 3 of the 4 dead were Jewish. 4 people stand vigil in half-hour shifts from midnight until noon on May 4th, when the commemoration program begins. In recent years, university presidents have participated in the candlelight procession and sometimes have spoken as well. There is regularly now a breakfast on May 4th honoring those among the wounded who are still living and their families. The University Bookstore sponsors an annual May 4th morning book signing for those of us who have published books about Kent. I'm embarrassed to say that it took many years for me to find my way, to find my path, to find my voice. It was incremental, my move from the conservatism with which I was brought up to the progressive liberal, both religiously and politically, that I am today. And it happened because I kept becoming acquainted, mostly by chance, with other political and religious liberals, those at the newspaper, those at a United Church of Christ church I was drawn to because of its music program, and eventually, via a very circuitous path, to Unitarian Universalism. Reverend Child. During the commemoration, there is always music. One year, Peter, Paul, and Mary came. They made their way down to the commons through the daffodils that had been planted on the hillside the guard had marched up that day. The hill had been planted with over 58,000 daffodils, one for every American killed in Vietnam. At that commemoration, Peter, Paul, and Mary sang, and we all sang with them, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" This year, we were to hear David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. We all remember their 4 dead in Ohio. Every year there are famous speakers too. Last year, Bob Woodward spoke explicitly about Richard Nixon, though everyone present understood that every word had implicit current application as well. This year, for the 50th, the planning committee riled up the right by inviting Jane Fonda, who of course said she would come. But after many months of planning and the creation of a rich and varied program, nobody is going back to Kent State this May. Some programs will likely happen virtually. Some will be rescheduled for the fall or for May of 2021. It's because people I was coming to know and respect expressed a different ideology than mine as a matter of course, a matter of fact, a matter of faith. They lived their beliefs, discussed them, worked for them, and gently made room for me to find my way there. It was the exposure to a different way of thinking, a different way of living, a different way of loving that tugged me from right to left, from judgmental pronouncements to a more reasoned view of life and people and theology. Reverend Child. It would be easy for me to despair about the cancellation of Kent's 50th. The truth is, I have already done that. But despair is not the end of the story. Some of us were troubled about the commemorations over the years being essentially just memorials, important as those memorials are, with insufficient attention to the context of the killings and echoes of that context today. Those students were killed and others wounded in the midst of a protest against an unjust war. In the most horrific way, the rights of freedom of speech and assembly were abrogated. Even worse, the deadly force of government was unleashed on citizens going about their daily life, unarmed people who were no threat to the guardsmen, hundreds of feet away. For years, some people wanted to write off the shootings as acts of individual guardsmen who panicked in a chaotic situation, or who somehow thought they were defending themselves. But it is no longer reasonably questioned that there was an order to fire. The government, not just individuals with loaded weapons, is responsible for the Kent massacre. It was the faith tradition I finally found, our faith tradition, that uplifted the 7 principles I cherish, those I agreed to affirm and promote when I became a member, those I eventually went to seminary for, becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister so I could more effectively live them into the world, as did those who nudged me along the way throughout my entire adult life, even before I found Unitarian Universalism. The inherent worth and dignity of every person is the first. Justice, equity, and compassion in human affairs, the second. And we could almost have stopped there because along the way I fell hard for those 2 principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, not just the wealthy, the accomplished, the powerful, the saved, those who agree with me, though sometimes it's easier to remember that principle with those who agree with me, but every single person. And justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, of course, that is the way to a moral life, to ethical living. Can there be any question? And fighting for those things are what we are called to do if we are to be moral and ethical people, to live moral and ethical lives. There simply is no doubt. Reverend Child. I am disappointed that I will not go to Kent in early May. Still, I rejoice that the program that was to happen included speakers from the Vietnam-era anti-war movement, as well as speakers more than ready and able to connect the dots with current events. Not everyone agrees about what happened at Kent State 50 years ago tomorrow. And not everyone agrees with my liberal progressive stance or that of many of the people in our Unitarian Universalist churches. But it is right for me, and I am so grateful to have had guides along the way to lead me here. It is right for me, and I believe it is right beyond me, out into the community, the nation, the world. And it is right for so many others who need us to fight for justice, equity, and compassion in the inherent worth and dignity of all, whether that fight takes place on a university campus, on the steps of the Capitol, serving the hungry at a soup kitchen, or housing the homeless in our own sanctuary. It is what we are called to do, morally, ethically, and for Unitarian Universalists, religiously. It is what we are called to do. Reverend Child. The hill above the Commons was replanted in daffodils last fall. The other day, a friend sent pictures of that hill, now awash again in yellow blooms. I have been assured that a little afternoon on May 4th, some lone soul will walk down that flowering hill to ring the old victory bell 4 times, very slowly, and then 9 times more. In spirit, all of us who have the blood of Kent still running in our souls will be there. In spirit, may we all be there as well. And now let us move into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, utilizing the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, words of peace. Breathing deeply and relaxed. Let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being common to us all and to all living things. Evoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living things. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility, with an awareness of the existence of life and of the sufferings that are going on all around us, let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and here on earth. Amen. And blessed, blessed be.